Milking the cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now. Don't like what I see in the city. Crime seems prime, what a pity. Looking at street lights and cars, wishing for new sights and stars. So I'm heading for clover and trees, taking my sweet lover with me. Well, whippoorwills call and do no harm, and peace abides on the farm. Together let's build a homestead where cows and pigs are all well fed, warming hands by a wood stove fire. What could give us more desire? Children playing with the chickens, homemade meals from pickings, in the garden compost grown, saving our seeds hand sown, feeding our family all from scratch, growing our food in the garden patch, milking a cow, slopping the sow, what a life we've come to now.
There we go. All right. Welcome to the third annual Food Independence Summit. It's great to be here and great to share with you again. Lots of improvements I'm seeing. You know, in innovation. It usually takes, people ask me, when did you and Teresa know that you were going to make it? I said 3 years. 3 years we were, okay, we're going to make it. And if you study the diffusion of innovation and, Peter Drucker and those great business books about innovation, somewhere between 3 and 5 years, you enter at this level and then you go down and it's all problems. And then you start solving them and it comes up. And somewhere between 3 and 5 years, you start to breathe. And so this is 3 years here, and I can just feel the efficiency and the redesign, and it's great to be here on the third year. So this morning, I want to take us on a little journey of imagination. Okay? So imagine it's 500 years ago, and you're a frog on the edge of a beaver pond somewhere in, well, it's not Ohio yet, obviously, but somewhere here, there's a beaver pond, and you're a frog on the edge of that pond. What would you know about the world if you were a frog on the edge of a beaver pond 500 years ago? That's the journey I want to take us on this morning. I think sometimes we, especially as adults, we don't allow ourselves to just free flow our imagination. We kind of lose that at 5 years old, and so I've pushed to try to recreate some of that imagination, and I think we can learn a lot if we just let ourselves think through what that would be. We can learn a lot from such an exercise. So these are, from a frog's perspective, 500 years ago on the edge of a beaver pond. What would I know about the world, about ecology, about energy, all sorts of things? So the first thing I would know is, I'm sitting there, there is no animal-less ecosystem. I'm watching deer come to the pond. I'm watching the beavers run around. I'm watching the spiders skitter across the top of the pond, salamanders, newts. I'm watching all these animals come. When Lewis and Clark took their expedition out through to the Northwest Corridor in 12, they said that they could not go a mile without encountering a bear. Imagine how many bears there were if every mile you went, you ran into a bear. There is no animal-less ecosystem. Well, so what's the reason for animals? One of the reasons for animals is to move fertility against gravity. Before machines, the only way the fertility that gravitationally moved to the valleys could get back up on a hillside was if a bird or a deer or a bison or an elk went and ate that, and then they would go up the top of the hill to lounge, and when they lounged, they pooped, or the bird sat on the tree and pooped. That was the way nature had, that's the way God designed it, to move fertility that gravitationally moved. The twigs, the minerals, everything headed downhill. So the fertile valleys is where stuff grazed, and then they went, and why did they go up on top of the hills? To chew their cud? Well, because of predators. You get up on top of the hill, and you can look out and you can see where the coyotes and the wolves and things are. There were 2 million wolves in the U.S., in what we call the U.S. today at that time. 2 million wolves, and they each needed 20 pounds of meat a day. That's a lot of meat, 40 million pounds of meat a day consumed just by the wolves. So this is a fantastic way that God set up the predator-prey relationship to move fertility from lower areas to upper areas. So as we have animals, one of the critical facets today is that animals allow us to concentrate fertility and move fertility where it needs to be. In fact, when the Crusades went through France and through Normandy on their way to the Crusades in the 14 and 1500s, they recorded in their records that they constantly ran into farmers who were stall-feeding cattle. In the parable of the prodigal son, the stall-fed calf was not grain-fed; it was green chop. People would go out and they'd side their grasses and bring it in on an ox cart, carry the manure out. So there were these extremely fertile 1 acre, 2 acre spots around the home called curtilage, around the curtilage that were heavily fertilized by the concentrated animal manure. So moving fertility around is critical. Pruning, okay? The fastest way to build soil is with grass, not trees and not bushes. Now, I don't dislike bushes, I don't dislike trees, but all the rich soils on the planet are not found under forests, and they're not found under bushes. They're found under prairie grasslands that are pruned continually in a strategic way, rest and disturbance by herbivorous animals. And think about another reason for animals. So the pruning keeps things, freshened up and metabolizing in juvenile growth spurt. Another reason is, think about, how many of you have ever made a compost pile? Ever made a compost pile? Yeah, lots of us. Okay. Well, a compost pile can be kind of finicky. If you get it too wet, it stinks. If you get it too dry, it just sits there. If you don't have enough carbon, don't have enough nitrogen, it can be kind of finicky. But think about when an animal eats biomass, it decomposes in 24 hours what we take 6 months to do. And the temperature's always right. The moisture's always right. The microbes are always right. All the balance is perfect. And a cow takes that biomass and turns it into a concentrated high fertility form in 24 hours that we kind of struggle with sometimes because composting is a little bit difficult. Isn't that cool? So think about an animal as a very, very rapid compost pile. And real-time energy for those using livestock as motive power. So, number one, there's no animalless ecosystem. So this whole notion that we can farm without animals, or we can have a farm without animals, I don't think you can have a farm without animals. I'm sorry, those of you here who are just corn and soybean growers, and no, you can't have an authentic farm without animals. That's what closes the ecosystem loop. Number two, I'm a frog sitting on the edge of the pond. What else do I notice? Well, energy comes, everything is being driven from proximate energy sources. It's not coming from oil drilled in Saudi Arabia. Okay? The energy that's driving the system is proximate. We have energy from water. You know, a stream maybe is coming into the beaver pond, so there's the force of water. There's, of course, the force of wind. There's, of course, the power of the sun, which includes biomass, trees that can be burned. The point is that energy is not being piped in from far away. Energy is being created from on-site proximity. I remember very well having a discussion with Woody Tash. He started the alternative investment outfit, Sound Money, and he was an investor in New York, and he had a place on Martha's Vineyard, a very ritzy place out on the coast of Massachusetts. And he said that if every home in America that was tied to the grid instead bought a Honda generator, that we would actually save energy by every home having a Honda generator over the grid system. Why? Because so much power is lost just in thousands of miles of transmission lines. I know when you drive out through Montana and Idaho, every time I drive out through there, I think, my goodness, how do they possibly make this thing run? You know, they've got miles of poles out to a lonely ranch house. It's amazing, but there's a lot of loss in power coming from far sources. Number 3, carbon doesn't move very far. Carbon does not move very far. Think about the way nature works. In the fall, the deciduous trees, leaves fall. Maybe pine needles fall. Okay, so there's things falling, but they don't blow very far. They don't blow across the continent. They blow a few hundred yards and pile up against, a fence line, a tree line, or something like that. Leaves don't blow very far. Grass doesn't go. If grass or weeds or things get up and get lignified and mature and fall over and lodge, they don't blow anywhere. They just go on site. Manure. Animals don't travel very far. From the time that forage or those seeds or whatever were eaten until they're pooped out, not very far. As far as a bird can fly in a couple hours, as far as a bison can walk in an hour, it's not very far. So what we want is a farming system that uses carbon in situ and doesn't move it very far. What we want is a recycling. We want a true carbon economy, which means our carbon doesn't get exported. That's critical because that closes the loop. Number 4, hydration occurs on site. All right? Hydration occurs on site. Water determines carrying capacity. Production is tied to water. So, on site, we have these beavers, we have this vegetation around the pond. The pond, it indicates nested water, and so the pond indicates retention rather than drainage. One of the problems in the U.S. that we still have a problem in our United States DNA is that we were settled by largely temperate area cultures, Germany, British, Scotland, and there water is primarily a drainage issue, not a hydration issue. But in 90% of the world, water is primarily a hydration issue, not a drainage issue. And we still have this problem in policy today. And so, for example, all these, every time a road or a highway or interstate goes over a valley, they put the culvert down in the bottom of the valley and then pile dirt up over it so the road can go over. Are you with me? What we need to be doing, what we do on our farm is whenever we build a lane or a road across a thing like this, is we put the dirt in, make the fill, and then we put the pipe in the top of the fill instead of the bottom. Now you have the same road going across, but now you have a pond on the uphill side. 500 years ago, North America was 8% water. 8% water. We know that now. Now we are less than 4% water. That water was from beaver dams. And if you can imagine doubling plus the amount of surface water in the U.S. today, imagine what that would do to evapotranspiration, to hydration, to base flow, to springs. Louis Bromfield, one of our great iconic gurus of our whole movement, writing, Malabar Farm. How many of you know about Louis Bromfield, Malabar Farm? Yeah, up around Worcester. Okay, I was born in Worcester, by the way, so every time I come to Ohio, I have this kind of primal thing. Of course, I was only here 6 weeks, so it wasn't very long. But he always said, that you can't control water downstream. You can't control water on the Mississippi and the Ohio River. What you need are millions and millions of little swimming pool-sized farm ponds in the highlands, like big Paul Bunyan and the Babe the Blue Ox, and imagine big hoof prints all over the landscape. And the cumulative effect is that traps the surface runoff and keeps it where it is. So I'm a huge believer in ponds, love ponds. And we need to be building a lot more ponds on our farms. Every time we make a little bit of money, we build another pond. We built, 20, 30 ponds over the years, and we just keep building them every time we make a little bit of cash. Number 5, seasonality dominates biology. Seasonality dominates biology. If I'm a frog on the edge of a pond, I'm not expecting strawberries in February down at Walmart. Okay? I'm not going to eat strawberries in February. Now, if I'm a frog, I probably didn't can any or freeze any back during the season. But today, with some modern technology, okay, we can extend the season, we can preserve things, and we can push that seasonality. But as far as freshness and availability, we're going to celebrate the cycles. What's wrong? What's wrong emotionally, spiritually, to encourage the idea that, it's springtime and strawberries will be in, and then raspberries, and then blackberries, and then apples, and we eat our way through the season in humble subservience and submission to the beauty of the cycles, instead of despising them and hating them. Well, it's on a radio program, guy in Vermont. This was in January, and he said, I'm having a house party next week, and I want corn on the cob. What's wrong with me having corn on the cob in Vermont? I said, well, why didn't you grow extra corn in last year and freeze it, and then you can have corn on the cob in Vermont? This isn't who made us king to dominate all this? So the rest and growth of the cycles celebrate. Number 6, disturbance and rest cycles. I'm sitting on a frog, and I'm the frog sitting on the pond. Yeah. I'm the frog sitting on the pond, and off in the distance I hear a volcano. I remember the flood of the spring. I remember the drought of the summer. I remember the fire that came through. I'm watching animals come up, groundhogs and prairie dogs, and they're digging. If I was in Australia, they're wombats. They've uncovered wombat skeletons now. Wombat is like a great big cross between a groundhog and an armadillo. I was there in Australia, and a lady had tamed a couple of them with some carrots. And so she said, come over and I'll let you touch a wombat. And okay, so we went over to her house in the evening. They're nocturnal. And so she went out there, sure enough, with this little bag of carrot. Here came this wombat waddling up. The thing about 100 pounds. They have a kind of hard skeletal structure. About 100 pounds. They're, about 4 times the size of a big groundhog. And they dig. They dig holes. In fact, she had to bury a 10-foot deep fence around her house because they were digging under her house and undermining her house. They go down 10, 12 feet. How'd you like to run that with your tractor? Well, they've now found skeletons in Australia of wombats that were 9 feet tall. Imagine those holes. We're coming around the corner meeting that dude. Just like here in the U.S. now, we've found skeletons of beavers that were the size of a Volkswagen automobile. They could take down some trees, let me tell you. This disturbance in rest cycles is a big deal. I call this ecological exercise. We have this idea in our nation today, as people have become more and more disconnected from ecology, that the ecology can be stagnant. We can put an artificial boundary around this park, around this area, and it'll just stay like this. No, ecology doesn't stay like that. It doesn't even want to stay like that. It wants to have periodic disturbance as exercise to move different species, different diversification, to restart things. Disturbance and rest cycles are really important. And so don't apologize. If you need to come out and you need to put an access lane through a place and cut down an old tree, and that's the best place for your access lane, cut down the old tree, put in your access lane. Disturbance has been happening for a long time, and if that allows you to better massage your landscape with loving caress, do it. It's okay to exercise. Number 7, the waste of one is the input for the next. There is no landfill. There is no away. Everything is cyclical. It's not linear. There's no away. There's no refuse. Everything is reused on site. Everything that is a waste product of one thing becomes the input of the next thing. There's no ultimate loss of matter. There's no ultimate loss of biomass. We have death, life, decomposition, regeneration, death, life, decomposition, regeneration. That cycle is ongoing. The waste of one's the input for the next. Manure feeds the plants. Number 8, I'm watching my time here. Number 8, processes are driven by local information. Everything that's going on here in this pond that I'm sitting on the edge of, the processes that are going on are done by local information. I call this indigenous adaptation. What fits here? And there's going to be different principles or different rest and disturbance cycles, whether I'm in Ohio versus, Arizona. It's bounded by localness. One of our problems today is, I don't want to get too political here, but one of our problems is that we have arrogated to the federal government 90% of American decision-making power that's supposed to be done at the state and local level. And that's one of the reasons we have such bifurcation and polarization and animosity in our culture, because we have arrogated to the federal level all these little micromanaged things, and the stakes are so high. We talk about the politicians, the lobbyists, buying politicians. Well, let me tell you, if all of our decisions weren't for sale, nobody would be selling them. And our problem is that our politicians are so micromanaging. I'll get on the rabbit trail, but one of the things that we learn sitting at the pond is that the processes are driven by local information. How many deer are there? How many wolves are there? How many bison are there? How much water is there? It's a localized decision-making process. And so what we want as we think through this is we want a system that creates the most localized information possible. Number 9, I've got 12 by the way, all right, I'm cooking through. Number 9, the system runs primarily on perennials, not annuals. Now, are there annuals in nature? Absolutely. But most of the time, they're short-term healers. They're short-term placeholders until perennials can come in. Nature prefers perennials. Perennials have a very different energy flow than annuals. Perennials are extractive of solar energy. Did I say that right? Annuals are extractive of solar energy. Perennials are addition of energy in the ground. Because an annual extracts from the ground and makes this big seed, this big fruit, this big something up here, and it's depending on that to recreate itself next year when it's planted again. The perennial has to, by root structure, by its own carbohydrate savings account, it has to handle droughts and blizzards and floods and heat and all these things. And so the perennial takes energy and keeps pumping it into its root structure, into the what you don't see, everything that's below the ground, and that then provides its bank account and investment. Well, in doing so, it takes all of those carbohydrates and sends them out into the soil and develops soil. We call this pulsing the pasture when we're doing mob stocking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. Again, touching on U.S. I call it the U.S. policy. Remember, the U.S. subsidizes, well, I know the thing now is crop insurance. It sounds a lot better than subsidies. But the U.S. subsidizes I'm not asking for a subsidy. I'm just saying that our policy subsidizes only annuals and only 6: corn, cotton, soybeans, sugar, wheat, and rice. So our entire farm policy incentivizes annuals to the exclusion of perennials. And yet perennials is what drives ecology, it's what builds the soil, all those things. And this is why herbivores and sea creatures were the foundation of ancient diets before the industrial age, before the current mechanization, chemical fertilizing situation, because planting was arduous. Planting was difficult. When you're walking with a sharp stick behind an ox, you can't plant very much, you can't do very much. Grain was always extremely expensive. They didn't have, read Thomas Jefferson's farm book. If we had the same ratios today, wheat would right now be $30 a bushel. Corn would be $30 a bushel. Imagine what that would do to the price of chicken. Suddenly, beef, if it was managed correctly, would be the peasant's food, which is the way it was throughout history, instead of chicken being the peasant's food. The only reason chicken is cheaper than beef is because we've chemicalized and mechanized to the point where grain is cheap for the first time in human history. And that apes the whole ecology of the perennial being the queen and the annual being the peasant. Number 10, quickly, polycultures. As I look around, I'm a frog, I'm looking around here, I'm seeing polycultures. I'm not seeing monocultures. I'm seeing polycultures, lots of diversity. There's multi-species of everything working in symbiosis, synergy, and competition. There are complex relationships, okay? And these complex relationships block pathogens and change the whole movement of pathogens and those kinds of things. Right now we're facing, you watching situations with this high-path avian influenza coming up through Texas, and now it's in the cows. Now it's killing people, and the worst thing is it killed 24 cats. And Americans are far more concerned about cats than kids. You just tell by how much they buy for pet food. You're going to be seeing this. And every one of these cases of high-path avian influenza is coming from a monoculture outfit. It's coming from a factory house, a concentration, what I call a concentration camp farming system, not from polycultures. Number 11, integration. I'm looking across the pond, and I'm seeing integration. Nothing is segregated. It's all highly integrated. Today, in modern American agriculture, we grow the chickens over here, fed grain that's grown over here, that's fertilized from material from Russia and Morocco, and the manure, it goes over here, and the chickens are processed over here, and then they're sold over here, and the whole thing is broken up, highly segregated. I'm a frog sitting on the pond, and I'm seeing everything is integrated. And that's one of the things I'm such an encourager of kitchen chickens, okay? The animal to start with, if you're wanting to start, is with chickens. They're wonderful. We should be taking our kitchen scraps, feeding them to chickens, not putting them in the garbage to go to a landfill. 75% of everything that's gone in sanitary landfills in the U.S. is compostable. Folks, that's a highly segregated system. And by the way, this includes honoring the workers. There's no them and us. It's all just us. And finally, the 12th thing I'm noticing as a frog is that everything participates. I don't have the luxury as a frog of waking up one morning and saying, you know what? I'm just not going to, I'm just not going to participate today. This thing can just go on without me. No, in nature, nothing gets to disconnect. Nothing gets to say, I won't participate. Today, we have many people in our country who think that they can have an authentic, credible food system without participating. The biggest lie in the world is, I want change, but I don't want to. They're all pointing out saying, well, if you do this, and if you do that, and if you do this, and if these people would do that, and if these people do that, you know what? If I want something to change, the guy that's going to change it is looking in the mirror at me. Okay? And so, non-farmers actually hold the key to sustainability in our culture. My recipe for participation to urbanites is get in your kitchen, practice domestic culinary arts, get in your kitchen. That's number one. Number two, grow and do something yourself, even if it's a quart jar of mung bean sprouts on the windowshelf. Participate in the majesty and the mystery and the magnificence of life. And number three, find your local food treasures. That's my three-part recipe for participation for urbanites. But your attendance here shows that you get participation. You didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what, we're not going to participate. So I salute every one of you. I honor you. You could have been anywhere today than here, and you've chosen to invest in a participatory mechanism to learn how to integrate better, how to be that frog on the edge of the pond better, and how to nest into our ecology for soil building, hydration, nutrient-dense food, and all the wonderful things that we're going to enjoy the next 2 days. So thank you for being here. Thank you for deciding to participate. Thank you for coming. And thank you for being part of the change that we're looking for in our country. It needs us. It needs you. We all need to pull together to make our place a better place to nest and to sit on the edge of our ponds. Thank you.